Hi, everybody. I'm Crystal. I work for CIC. Usually this spot is a place where we talk about podcasts we've listened to over the week, but today we're going to be talking a bit about community.
Yeah, I think we had a podcast all lined up that just didn't really seem to fit the theme, and so instead, Crystal and I wanted to just kind of talk about what the word meant to us, and then see what it meant to other people, because it's definitely a word with a pretty flexible definition attached to it. Um, and so I think to start off, we wanted to dive more into communities that didn't exist because of proximity or because of a place. So while neighborhoods are fantastic and I love mine, I think definitely being in a more virtual setting for the past 2 months has made me reevaluate the virtual communities that I'm in, whether those exist through social media or through friends that I, used to be able to see in person. And just what those were, like what places those had in my life. Um, so I stumbled across a definition of community that I really liked, which was a group of people who care about each other and feel that they belong together. Um, so that is the definition I've landed on for myself.
Yeah. For me, community can be, I feel like I sometimes put it together with friend group because sometimes you have like your friend group is like, it could be, it could be defined any kind of way. So I have friends that I'm friends with because we have a shared interest in something, and then I have friends who I just grew up with. A couple of friends who I grew up with, so they're my friends for that reason. But then community, I feel like has a little bit more like it seems more purposeful, I guess. And so I feel like when I think about community, I think about a group of people who belong together and have a similar trajectory or purpose, if that makes any sense. Does that, what are some other definitions for community if anybody wanted to unmute themselves and share?
Well, actually, Crystal, I think purposeful is a good word to use when describing community because, this is kind of trite at this point, but we've all been exploring, like virtual communities in the past few months. And a couple of that I've like found myself using more often now, like the Citizen app, especially like this past week has been a huge help to understanding what's going on in your neighborhood. And it's been a cool way to, maybe not on the deepest level, but, interact with people in your immediate area
Mhm.
and just kind of, keep a pulse on what's going on. And similar to that, I also go on Reddit a fair amount. And I've been on the Philadelphia subreddit. And again, this past week or so, been on there a lot more often. And it's interesting, like talking to people because, I mean, some people are way more forthcoming with their addresses than I am. But it's interesting to find out that, like, oh, that person's a block away.
Right.
Yeah, so it is cool. I don't know, just to learn, how connected you actually are to, someone, you just find randomly on the internet and you can, talk about what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I remember, I've lived in a world before the internet, and so before when you were around, you basically your community was the people you were around. It was all proximity based. It was people you went to school with, people who lived on your block, that kind of thing. And the funny thing about that is there's no guarantee that you're going to have anything in common with any of those people. It's just that they happen to be around you. And so once the internet was something that I could access on a regular basis, I went seeking because I was felt like an oddball, around the people I was around. So I went out seeking, these communities of folks that were like-minded and liked the things I liked and stuff. One of my friends that I met in that same way, I've been friends with for 10 years, and she's one of my closest friends. So you can really like grow from that.
That's cool. And I've actually seen, to that point, I think podcasts have been huge for that. Like you'll see either the hosts will talk about it, like, or you'll see on, forums or whatnot, but, not having people with similar interests that they can relate to, like a lot of people from small towns or something. And, now they get to listen to conversations between people who think just like them, but nobody in their town does. And
Yeah.
it gives them an outlet and makes them realize, like, oh, I'm not weird for thinking about these things.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
neat.
like that could be the purpose. That like, sometimes it's not like the purpose is to, erect a monument. No, sometimes it's just like the purpose is to not feel like a crazy person. Like that's the purpose of this community.
Right.
All right. Anybody else have any definitions that they wanted to share?
I feel like I haven't thought too much about this, like coming into this and like what my definition of community is. But as you guys were starting to talk about it, to me, it's kind of like whoever you're surrounded by. Like it's not even necessarily a choice thing, right? Like it's your neighbors who you don't know so well. It's the people who work in your building that like you may not have ever talked to. So I think for me, it's like even broader. It's not the people that I choose to surround myself with. It's just kind of everybody who is in my sphere and circle.
Right, I have a follow-up question for that. Because I know we were talking about like the different purposes that communities serve for different people. Do you find that the purpose is different for communities that you are intentionally in versus communities that you are unintentionally in? Or like, I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so like the communities that like you choose to be a part of versus like the ones you're just naturally like a part of but didn't intentionally choose to be. Is that right?
Yeah, like what do you seek from each one?
Oh man. Well, if for communities that I'm unintentionally a part of, like I guess I think like no, I don't necessarily have as much of a purpose, but that doesn't mean that one isn't like ultimately fulfilled or like served, in a serendipitous way. And then ones that I choose to be a part of, sure, like, I mean, yeah, I think that there's a purpose to them. Oh, you're on mute, Crystal.
How do I do that? So particularly about the proximity ones, because sometimes the purpose is like, okay, so you may have a block. Let's say you have a block captain and you're all working together because you all want to do a street cleaning. So you want, to get the rope, get the place roped off and all this. So it could be like a specific purpose, even though like you may not even really know each other on a personal level or necessarily consider yourself friends, but in that moment you are like allied to get a thing done. And then like if you're an entrepreneur or someone who is in business, then that, can take on a whole new level of, working together for a purpose as opposed to, oh, I like that person, they're part of my community, so it can be a little bit more advantageous.
Totally.
Crystal and Grace, I had a question for you. How have you guys been, maintaining the CIC community throughout this? Like, how do you keep in contact with people? And yeah.
Well, that's a very good question. We've always been very kind of like responsive to the community through email and that kind of thing. Obviously Zoom is everybody's best friend now, and just kind of frequently checking in with each other as because when you're working as a group to bring services to other folks, you have to stay in touch and make sure everybody's on the same page. So we meet pretty frequently and, set goals, work together, Google Suite, working together on documents together and like building stuff out like that. Grace, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think that The transition to working virtually was definitely like a very difficult one. And yes, like staying active on Slack and email definitely helps, but it is hard when you are, you sort of, what Natalie was saying, you're unintentionally brought together in a community because of a shared workspace. You know, you don't get to pick the people that are there. And so when that shared, you know, commonality disappears, I think it can be pretty difficult to kind of like gather what's left. But I do think that what CIC was always pretty good at was, you know, making sure that employees and clients had interactions outside of just a workspace. And so I know that there are some clients and coworkers that I have a lot in common with. And even just talking about that virtually kind of keeps that community vibe going. So like I picked up some lettuce seeds from my coworker Nathan because we're both growing gardens. And so yes, we're still talking about work, but we're also talking about our shared interests, and kind of using those shared interests to weave a web within our workplace has definitely helped translate it virtually.
Yeah.
Nice.
I would agree.
Yeah,
What about you all? I mean, obviously y'all have your venture cafe, so that's that's very helpful. But like, you know, how was that transition initially?
you know, we I can speak for Quorum at least. You know, little plug, lunchtime lessons, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And yeah, they're on the CIC calendar, which I super appreciate you guys always sharing that. But I'll say for like the Science Center side of things, like internally, you know, it did take me a couple weeks to realize that there's some more effort involved now in actually like communicating with people, kind of what you said, Grace, like you don't choose who you're with, but just that proximity lends itself to, you know, different conversations and stuff like that. And, you know, I realized after, you know, a week or two of working virtually, I was no longer communicating with people I talk to every day, like Jana, who
Mm-hmm.
a few of us know. You know, we talk, you know, a lot
Yeah.
every day. And then when it's, you know, now you're focusing on work and you don't just get to bump into people,
Yep.
you actually have to make that effort to, you know, reach out and see how
Yep.
people are doing. And also to that point, Tracy has been, or that was weird. Tracy has been organizing these chat times for the Science Center. You know, they're not mandatory, but you know, once a week we all get together just to talk about what's going on. You know, we had a couple chats this week about recent events, but generally they're, you know, just a time to get together and, you know, shoot the breeze.
Absolutely. I I sometimes think about quality of like the quality of a community, and like if that's not a okay thing to think about, because sometimes you have your quality, and by quality I mean like, are these the people that are going to help you with your purpose? If you have a specific purpose, are being around these people, are they going to allow you to or help or assist you, or at least not hinder you from your purpose? And you know, always kind of thinking back to that idea of entrepreneurship, and like you know, being someone who wants to create and propagate what they put in the world. Is there anybody or any, you know, multiple bodies in your, whether it's in your proximity or just people you talk to all the time that you consider part of your community? Are there people there who are maybe not conducive to that, to your goals? Are there people who would be conducive to your goals if you felt vulnerable enough to share it, you know, that kind of thing? And like, you know, just kind of always looking at those things. I'm not, you know, I'm not an entrepreneur myself. I'm actually, but I am a freelance writer. So that's kind of like very self-directed, where you kind of got to get your leads and, you know, pitch and all that demoralizing stuff. And so I'm always thinking about like all the writers and that I consider part of my community. And like when one of them gets like a big job or gets a big got or a cover story or something like that, it's like, wow, that's so, that's aspirational, and it really can like drive you and make you feel even like a little bit, competitive, where you're like, oh, I want to do that too. So I think about those things. And then I also think about how sometimes, depending on how you're feeling about yourself, sometimes seeing somebody else get something that's really, really like a big get might make you feel like, well, what am I doing wrong? And so you got to always be mindful that you are a good citizen in your own community, and don't, beat yourself up about stuff.
Yeah, I think it's called a circle of success. Surrounding people with, either on the same path as you, or at least oriented towards, improving themselves and supporting you as well. And funny enough, like a few years back, I did some freelance writing for like a year and a half. And one of the biggest helps was joining a Facebook group of other freelance writers. Not only because, sometimes people would, hand you projects, like if they were too busy, like, hey, can someone take a shot at this? But also just getting tips, like, as you said, the demoralizing pitch process, especially when you start. Everyone feels so personal, every no.
Exactly.
It's as if they're like sitting next to you when they say it.
No.
So going through that process with other people and them sharing their failures even can be, uplifting in a weird kind of way, because you're like, all right, I'm not alone. And even the people who are further along and more successful are still running into, no's and messing up projects and stuff like that. So it's definitely beneficial to have people on the same path around you.
Yep. And that's the key. Like, I'm not alone. Like, that's, if nothing else, that's what community gives you, is like that feeling of I'm not alone. I'm not all by myself in this. And, sometimes we do get in our heads, or at least I know I do, get in my head and think that like I'm the only one going through something. And then you find out that's absolutely not.
Yeah.
I was just thinking about kind of going off of what Crystal said about the quality of the community, and also, what was mentioned earlier about at a distance, and how that can really test communities and see what they're really about. And just reflecting on, like, when I was in college and, living on a college campus and surrounded by this college community, and then, a smaller friend community who I spent so much time with, and who were really my people to help me grow and get through that time. But then once we graduated and went our separate ways, it was just, the community's evolved, and there's quite a few people who were in my day-to-day life who I don't have much communication with anymore. But there's some people who are part of that community who are still with me and are supporting me in a different way, because we've kind of grown in the same direction and are taking, paths where we can continue to support each other. So just kind of those, the overlaps of how different people can be a part of your community through different communities, through different stages. And the testing of the distance as well. Like, maybe if we were all back in the same exact space again, I'm sure we do a lot of, reminiscing, but would we still have that same bond of like, we're going through the same thing, or we're, striving towards the same goals? Probably not. So I think it's interesting how they evolve.
I love that. Yeah, that's so real. Like, sometimes they change, and they, like you said, they evolve. And that's, sometimes one thing I had heard someone said, like, some people are in your life for a season, like they were really important to you at one point, and then, that point passes, and it doesn't make it less important. It's just like, that was a point in your journey, and, your journey goes on. So I think that's so important to remember as well. Thank you, Colleen.
And Colleen, I actually wanted to ask, or anyone, feel free to share if you've experienced this, but did you notice anyone within that community like as things changed, did you notice like certain people who you weren't as close to initially became you know are now your standbys, and people who you were closer to initially have kind of faded away? Was there any of that kind of transition?
Yeah, I would say I've definitely had experience with the latter, where it's like the people who are like the go-tos at one point are not anymore. Um, and yeah, it's, I don't know, it's an interesting evolution that when that happens, and um, yeah, I have to think about it a bit more.
No, yeah. I just asked because specifically from college, as you like, I think back on that, and you know, definitely no ill will towards anyone I was close with, but it is funny to you know, especially freshman year. That's when you spend like a whole lot of time with a certain group, and then kind of break off a little bit. And you know, thinking back, it's like, oh wow, like I don't really communicate to any of those people anymore. But you know, people I met up with in sophomore year now I'm still very close with, which I'm thankful for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I'm
definitely true. And oh, sorry, go ahead,
no,
Crystal.
no, no, you go ahead, Colleen.
Um, I've definitely experienced that. And then also, I guess this is more of just like a personal bond than a community thing. But thinking of freshman year, I met one of my still best, well, I met a few of my best friends freshman year, and one of them actually transferred after that year. And we've never lived close to each other since, but still remain super close. And she's still part of like my greater friend community. And I would say one of the people who's closer to me and gets me on a level that people who I still see day to day do not.
Yeah.
Exactly. I've been there.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, one of the great equalizers for me, I've been living in Philadelphia for 24 years, 25 years now. And one of the first things I went to was this festival called Odunde, and it's the first Sunday of June every single year, and it's actually the biggest like African American festival in the world, and it happens right down on like the graduate hospital area, and I it's such a huge thing, and if I don't see people day to day, I know I'm going to see everybody I know from Philly, and some folks from Jersey, some folks from New York. I know that's the day I'm going to see all the people I want. So sometimes community is like, yeah, I don't see you every day, but I know that one time a year, or, every so often I see you, and it's like we never parted ways, and I have different eras in my life, from when I first moved here and was in college, then when I first got my first job, and now, and like all these different steps along my way. And going to Odunde is like that clutch where I can meet people from every little era, every little Philadelphia era. And this year is their 45th year, and they are doing a virtual week as opposed to that one day. They're doing a virtual week of programming. So I think that I'm going to definitely check that out and see if I can see some familiar faces.
That's really cool. I love low maintenance relationships like that. Like, you know, not that, you know, I don't, of course, you know, I'm one to make effort in all of my relationships, but it is so cool. Like, thankfully, just before this pandemic started, I hadn't seen one of my friends from college for like a year and a half. And we got to hang out a week before quarantine. And it was like nothing skipped a beat. It was just like, oh, it's like we're back in the dorms or something. It's just,
Yeah,
yeah, it's sweet.
those are precious relationships.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's definitely weird how like you can belong to so many different communities and they all hold a different purpose, and like each community that I know I belong to like takes a different amount of work from me. Like there are definitely some that I don't have to put any work in for a year and then I can come back and it's fine. And there are others that I have to constantly put work in every single day to be an active member of that community so that it serves its purpose for me. And so I found that like sometimes I can just get very overloaded, and what I like to do is kind of demote a community to just a group, where I feel like I don't have to put in any participation. I'm still with people who have shared interests, but it doesn't hold the same place as a community would, because it definitely is easy to get really exhausted, feeling like you have to put in work in so many different corners. So yeah, I think that has been something that I've been focusing on while we've been kind of in this stay-at-home order, because it is a good time to reflect on like where you are able to put work in and where you're not able to put work in, and just readjust your priorities and what you need from your communities.
Yeah. I actually have a standing meeting. We don't always make it, but on Saturdays, like a very small community, it's like a little sister circle of 4 women. It's just us 5, and we try to meet once every Saturday on Zoom because it's a lot going on right now, and it's very harrowing, and you're up, you're down. Sometimes you're down for far too long, and you just need people who you can discuss things with and cry with if you need to, or laugh with. I mean, just roar laughing. Sometimes the best laughs, or the only laughs I get in a week, is this standing call that I have with this sister circle. And I think that's the crux of community. Sometimes it saves your life. It saves everything.
Definitely. I've been doing the same on Facebook video chats with a few friends. We've had like a good 5 or 6 of us every Saturday. And it's funny, like how much I'll look forward to those. I mean, recently I've started going on like hikes at a safe distance from people. So it's been nice to see everyone in person, but I was surprised how quickly I transitioned to video calls and actually being excited and enjoying.
I know, right?
Yeah.
All right, does anybody have any last thoughts? All right.
Thank you so much, guys. This was great.
So I don't know if you guys can hear me. Things were kind of breaking up there.
Me too.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I guess that's it. Oh, I guess I'm the host of this thing. So. All right, cool. Well, it was great talking to you guys.
Absolutely. It's great talking to you all. It's great seeing so many different faces and names. I know that there's plenty more going on, so definitely check out what's next and go to the next session. Thank you.
Sure.